Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
And it's time once again
to recommend things.
Hi Vince.
Hi Cap.
What do you recommend today?
Today I'm recommending a movie. I'm not sure why it was wedged, but a movie. I'm going to tell you a quick story that leads into me recommending John Carpenter's The Thing. When I first started getting into horror movies, back when I was a kid, I was kind of a wimp. I was afraid of horror movies. It just freaked me out. The idea that anybody would want to watch people dying on screen. I'm like, oh, that's creepy. But that's, incidentally, the point. So, the first horror movie that I watched that made me say, well, this isn't so bad, was Freddy vs. Jason. And I said, this was weird and funny and tongue-in-cheek and whatever. It wasn't quite as awful as I thought it would be. And the violence was so over the top that I didn't care anymore. And this was the first horror movie that I saw that I took seriously and thought it was great. I was so impressed by this movie. And, oh my god. Kurt Russell, it's hard to not like Kurt Russell in most things. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you.
He's one of my favorites. I think he's just an interesting guy. I think as he's gotten older, he's become a better actor. But I think he's generally somebody you want to see in comedies. But this is really serious and psychological. And essentially, for those of you who are young enough to not know, the Thing is about an alien who can take the form of people, but it's not just a person who walks up and says, I am becoming you now. It's a really demented and crazy looking creature that's less of an intelligent being and more of a force of nature.
That would have been the horror film that you couldn't have taken seriously.
Yeah, but this is just really just visceral, disturbing stuff. And
a lot of slime.
And a lot of slime, indeed. A lot of blood, a lot of, we'll call it tissue.
And by the way, after all of that synopsis, can I just throw out real quick that my wife loves this movie, and she's not a horror person.
Yeah.
And it's not my favorite thing. I mean, it's good, and I get why my favorite thing. I guess it's my favorite version of the thing. But it's a good movie. I don't love to watch it, but it's a good movie.
You know what's really cool about this movie is that there is a certain degree of drama. That's where the psychological horror comes in. We have a lot of jump scares, which satisfies the people who are gore hounds and, traditional horror hounds, and we'll call them. And then the gore hounds get satisfied because there's a lot of really, literally visceral stuff in this movie. There's lots of guts. There's lots of disturbing crap. And then we have psychological horror, which to me is more important. It's more artistic. And you have people who distrust each other because any one of these people could be the Thing. So it's hard to be a person in this movie. The struggles are really, really interesting. And this was the movie that made me say, okay, I guess I don't hate horror movies. I thought they were all mindless, just, gore fests. Turns out, no, some of them are really good. And then, of course, you get things like American Psycho and Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, and yada yada. So
that actually go a lot farther in the psychological direction and are more human stories about real people. I think this is more middle of the road.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I feel like this is the great equalizer.
Sure.
I feel like if any one of these three movies, like if you're a big fan of jump scares, because that's what people typically look for, then this movie will be satisfactory to you. If you're one of those gore guys, that fine, this movie will be satisfactory to you. I'm holding it backwards. And if you like the psychological thriller or horror rather, then this is perfectly within your range. None of those aspects are overbearing, well, except for maybe the visceral gore.
I think so.
I think
a little bit.
I think that might be a little overbearing to the other two and may prevent full enjoyment of this movie. But I feel like if you just give it a chance, then you can make it through. Now, most people who are willing to watch a horror movie these days are really looking for the gore.
I also think psychological-wise, it's not even close to as disturbing as the other two films that you mentioned. Not even kind of. You know what I mean? Like this versus Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God, that movie is hard.
Yeah, I watched it on your recommendation after you told me not to watch it.
Oh, good. Wonderful.
He recommended it and said, I recommend this to everybody but Cap. Cap, you're not going to like this. You shouldn't watch it. And then it was on Netflix, and I was too curious, so I watched it.
And it was a well-written movie.
It is a well-written movie.
It is hard to watch. By the time you... Oh, my God.
You know what else I did? I made the mistake of watching that at like 2 in the morning with the lights off.
Oh, see, that's not even a gory movie. It's just the man cannot help himself despite better knowledge.
Yeah,
he is a scary guy.
It was fascinating,
a scary actor.
But anyway, yeah.
But yes, I recommend this movie. It's
I think I even like that better than The Thing, so I don't know what that says about me.
Better than the Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer?
Yeah, I think I even like that better than The Thing.
Well,
I don't know what that says about me.
That's interesting. I do think that Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is a more cleverly written movie because you have to do more with less.
There's more meat in it, story-wise, but
there's more,
or at least character-wise. Maybe not story-wise. That's the thing, is that, but it's a study. You know, it's a character study, and The Thing's not that, but it's still anyway.
I mean, you do have character arcs in this movie, and that's it's the bare minimum character arc. And that's pretty much what you can ask for in a horror movie. But I love it. As I said, great equalizer. This is my favorite. It's not too hoity-toity, high and mighty, kissing its own butt. Because sometimes you get that with artsy movies. But, yeah. Anyway.
Well, today I'm going to recommend a video game, Vince. I'm going to recommend a game from my childhood called Gex, which I... get the glare off it there. Which I have for the Sega Saturn. And this is a side-scroller that was put out during that period of that kind of transition period of like PlayStation and Nintendo 64, kind of just before all that was starting to happen, where you had systems like the 3DO that were trying. This by the way was also on the 3DO, trying to like say that they were like changing the game a lot with video games for like, now we're going to have more like, full motion video and all that kind of stuff, and it's going to change the way we play video games. And of course, a lot of the games that were coming out at that period on those kind of experimental systems weren't very good because, they could do some things that were technically new graphically that they couldn't do before, but they were also making really bad games, and like, a lot of those like full motion video games weren't actually video games. They were, you watch a movie and you occasionally make a decision, and a lot of them were really terrible. So anyway, Gex was one of the only really good games on the 3DO because it was just a side scroller and it was fun to play. And and again, I didn't have a 3DO. I don't think anybody did because they were like $700 and nobody bought them. But the Saturn I had, and of course I bought the Sega systems all the way up through the Dreamcast, with the exception of the Sega CD. I never had one of those, but I had Genesis into 32X, into Sega Saturn, into Dreamcast, and what was really interesting about Gex was that it was actually a franchise. This game started, and then 64 put out, I want to say, 2 Gex games. But the thing is, not everybody had a Saturn. A lot of people didn't, and and of course there were always more Nintendo people than there were Sega people. That's why Sega eventually, failed. And so I'm sure that there were people that played Gex on the 3D Gex games on the 64, and neither of them were very good, and didn't realize that there actually is a really, really, really good Gex game. This was a side-scroller, and it really utilized some of that new...
God?
It really utilized some of that new, 64-bit technology, 32 or 64, whatever it was at that point, bit technology, to render kind of more three-dimensional looking backgrounds and things while it was still a side-scroller. And the only thing that's kind of irritating about Gex is just that there are all of these one-liners that he's constantly spouting throughout the game, because it was kind of making a big deal out of the fact that now we can use like real voices and things in video games. And so like on the back of the box it says, have you ever heard of Dana Gould?
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, he voices Gex, and this says, HBO comedian Dana Gould fuels Gex with over 300 hilarious one-liners and sound effects. Okay, well, the problem with that is 300, so that's going to start getting repetitive really quick, right? And, some of it's funny, but really, like, it's programmed such where when certain things happen, certain kind of one-liners pop up, and after a while, you get a little bit sick of it. So that's the only thing that I don't like about the game, but basically the premise is Gex gets sucked into a TV, and and he has to go find remote controls. That's basically what it is. And he's trying to get himself out of this TV world, and so he has to go through different channels that are all based on kind of different genres of movies and television. So like the first one is kind of horror based, and then there's one later on that's more like kind of a ninja samurai sort of thing. And then there's like a cartoon kind of world, which I think was my favorite. So anyway, I think there's like 5 or 6 maps. It's a pretty long game for a side scroller, and it's one of my favorite side scrollers from when I was a kid. And most people that played this stand by it. It's pretty great, and it's not just like jumping on enemies. Like you're a gecko, so like you get to like flip your tail and stuff to whack guys, and it's a little bit different than some of your other side scrollers. I always thought it was pretty original for what it is, and I don't know the best way to play this if you don't have a Saturn. Which if you have a Saturn, you probably have Gex because it was one of the better games on that system. You know what I mean? But but I know it was on some other things. Like I said, it was on 3DO. I think it might have been on PlayStation. I think PS1 might have had Gex. I forget. But anyway, so that's
Gex.
That's Gex. And I haven't played this in a good long time. I should pop this back in because it was one of my favorites when I was a kid. So anyway, that's what I recommend.
And this is what I recommend.
Everybody, thanks a lot for watching Recommends. Next week we'll come back and what do you know? We'll recommend something else. How predictable. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
See you next time.